Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. Up next, catching the Ascension Wave, Bob Frizzell joins us to talk about everything you need to know about the coming Great Awakening. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Bob Frizzell with us, the founder of the Breath Academy Technique. We'll talk about that, and has been a teacher of breath work for more than 35 years. He's the author of several books, including Catching the Ascension Wave and the best-selling Nothing in This Book is True, but it's exactly how things are. Bob, welcome to the program. Looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, George. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to spend this time with you talking about my favorite topic. So here we are. Let's go. Let's do it, man.
Absolutely. By the way, what is breath work? What does that mean?
Well, it's called breath alchemy, and what breath alchemy is a way of discovering and then ultimately mastering your innate ability to transmute energy that had been life detracting. You know, the energy of fear, the energy of confusion, the energy of guilt, of shame, the energy of, we can go on with resentment and so on. To discover your innate ability, literally to transmute that energy into life-enhancing energy. So you get off the dime and you go from feeling lousy to feeling great, and you discover presence in your life, and you're able to get on with your life. You're able to begin to step out of the false reality that you and I really are not our minds, and that what we are, in fact, is something much greater than that. The mind was never, ever intended to be the master of our consciousness, always and only a faithful servant. But we might well get into, just exactly what happened that created us identifying completely with our minds. But now it's time to shift back to our true master. And our true master is only available in the present moment, and that's through the heartfelt connection that we all have to source energy, which is our higher self, connecting us to all that is. And so basically, in a soundbite or two, that's breath alchemy.
I enjoyed reading your book, Catching the Ascension Wave, and I
enjoyed writing it. Thank you.
I really love the little reference you had to Coast and the late Art Bell when he interviewed the remote viewer Ed Dames, who still pops up on our show every once in a while.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Doom himself, and I remember it well. Just to dig into that a little bit for people who might not be familiar with it. As you well know, George, Dr. Doom, Major Ed Dames, was a remote viewer, and he was talking about the solar flare, where ultimately the entire Earth gets buried under 40 to 400 feet of rock, and it's really probably not a very good place to hang around when that's going on, And so, I didn't really believe him. I didn't really believe him at the time because I decided, I don't really trust remote viewing. But I've dug a little bit deeper, and remote viewing has certainly shared some valuable and important space in my new book called Catching the Ascension Wave. So I've come around full circle on that.
A lot of people have, I think, when they really begin to understand the significance of remote viewing, they change their minds.
Yeah, well, what changed my mind was digging deep enough to realize that a good remote viewer is up to 100% accurate on their terrestrial viewings. Now, that's not too bad. And they're about 99% accurate on their off-planet viewings, and that's what I was looking at in a book called Cosmic Voyage, written by Courtney Brown, whose mentor, by the way, did happen to be Major Ed Dames himself.
That's right.
So, like I say, that played a very important part in my new book here.
How did you get involved in this area, Bob?
Well, wanting to know the truth, wanting to lift enough veils I've been digging around ever since the late 1970s, and in 1990, I got into this with really full intention. I just, like I said, I just got to a point to where I realized that so much of what we've been told and led to believe is true is probably not real, and it's probably not true. And I just got tired of being lied to, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I decided, I guess to make it my life's mission to just dig into this and find out what the heck is going on. Now, that's the one side of it, George, but the other side of it is that I was operating out of personal necessity, too. I had painted myself into a corner a few years earlier where the only way out was to, what I did was I created a disabling back injury. I mean, when it was out, I couldn't, it'd take me 45 minutes to try and figure out a way to get out of bed. I couldn't live my life.
That's pain.
So I had to find a way to heal myself. And that's really what got the whole thing going. And then from there, I just began to realize that, goodness sakes, everything is interconnected anyway, and that everything, furthermore, is a function of consciousness. And as I was beginning to wake up enough to realize that, it just led me into what at the time was a most exciting adventure, and I'm so glad to say that exciting adventure continues to this present day. I just really loved every moment of writing the book. It was just a labor of love.
You could tell you enjoyed it just by reading the chapters. I mean, you really got into various aspects.
And I like to have a little fun too, so I tried to do my best there to make it interesting, informative, and interesting. And really, my intention is that once you pick that thing up, you can't put it back down. That's what I'm after, and a lot of people have told me that I've succeeded. So I'm glad to hear that.
What is the Galactic Superwave that you talk about?
Yeah, here we go. Well, that's the whole premise of my book in so many ways, because what I say is that today there's an enormous infusion of this higher dimensional energy, this galactic superwave. This is what it's called in the secret space program. And what it's doing is dramatically raising the vibratory rate on the planet and, of course, everybody on it. Well, if we're going to catch the wave into higher consciousness, which is really what this is all about, there's a personal transformation that we have to make if we're going to be able to do that. And if we're able to make this shift, then we can align ourselves with an emerging presence of, and just awaken to the experience of inner peace and joyfulness, and be able to make a difference on the planet in a way that enables Mother Earth literally to reach critical mass and become lit from within. Because the whole point then to continue with catching the ascension wave is that I'm stating the case for us being on a third-dimensional planet that is very much in the process of moving into the higher vibratory rate of the fourth dimension. And this is not something unique to our planet. This is something that goes on a regular basis all throughout the cosmos. But ours is a particularly unique and rather interesting, frankly, amazing story. So it takes up a lot of space of the book right there, and I'm certain we can take a deep dive into it if that's what you'd like to do.
Absolutely. Well, you're with us for 2 hours. We'll take calls with you next hour.
Yeah, we got time to talk, don't we?
We do, sir. Yes, indeed. Bob, how much of it do you blend the metaphysical with the paranormal?
I don't know. I didn't spend any time looking at that question. The first thing I'll say is that the only things I write about and the only things I dig into are topics that resonate with me on a very, very deep level. And because I've been digging into this really with full intention ever since 1990, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And so, at a certain point in this journey, I discovered the whole process of ascension, and that's literally, again, moving into the shorter wavelength, higher vibratory energy of the fourth dimensional. Where when I mean higher vibratory rate, what I talk about and what I mean is that energy that's vibrating on a very high rate is energy that's in harmony with the unity of life. It shows up as joyfulness and inner peace and unconditional love and creativity and inspiration and compassion and all the good things like that. Now you contrast that with the denser vibratory rate that we've been embedded in third-dimensional reality for some time, and that's the energy of fear. It's the energy of frustration. It's the energy of upset and resentment and guilt and shame and things like that. So what does it all mean? Well, there's a very important document that I refer to on a repeated basis in my book. It's called The Law of One. And it came to us from a group, it came to us from our neighbors on Venus, and it originated 2.6 billion years ago. This is when Venus went through their dimensional shift, went from 3-dimension to 4th dimension. And at the time, they had 38 million inhabitants on their planet, probably harsher conditions there than here, and only about 6 million of them or so made it. And so the question is, well, what happened to the rest of them, and what happened to those who did make it through? To focus on those who made it through, they became known as the ancient builder race, and this is 2.6 billion years ago. And they began to venture out into the solar system, and they created all sorts of interesting structures, like obelisks and pyramids and towers and you name it, on various planets throughout not only our solar system, but throughout our local star cluster of 52 stars. And they were a benevolent race and were able to keep the peace in the solar system, but not just the solar system, throughout the entire 52-star cluster for about 2 billion years. So these were good guys, and they brought forth this document called The Law of One. And like I said, a lot of my material is just really based on what The Law of One says.
Well, that was Venus. What about Mars?
Well, Mars, very interesting. Oh, boy. To continue with the ancient builder race, who were able to keep the peace for about 2 billion years, about 500,000 years ago, something happened within our solar system on a planet that is no longer there. There once was a time when there was a planet called Maldek, also known by some as Tiamat. Now, that planet at that time is now, it's now the...
That's the asteroid belt, right?
There you go, between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. And we're told in the Law of One that Mars at the time was a moon of Maldek. Well, what happened is about 500,000 years ago, the beings on Maldek, known as the progenitor race, they became infused with, they bought into the dark forces. And they decided that it would be a very good idea to take the protective shield that the ancient builder race had used to keep the peace and to use it for destructive measures, and that is to go out and try and conquer other worlds.
Bob, we were talking about the planet that blew up between Mars and Jupiter, and that Mars might have been its moon.
Yeah, Mars definitely was its moon back in the day. And so it got blown out of its orbit into the orbit that we now know, and became a planet. But it had its atmosphere blown away, and so things did not turn out well for the folks on both Maldek and on Mars. And on Maldek, before they completely destroyed their planet, a small group of them, I mean, this is a huge, huge planet, maybe a population of close to 1 trillion,
Jeez.
A significant number of them, however, were able to escape, and they came to Earth. They landed in Antarctica, which at the time was not buried under 2.5 miles of ice.
I was going to say, why land there, right?
Pardon?
I was going to say, why land there?
Yeah, and so they built a city there and a huge pyramid, and just got things going here, kept things going rather on Earth. But the rest of them, well, they had a bit of a rougher ride. Now, we need to dig a little bit deeper into this defensive shield that the ancient builder race. That the ancient builder race created. We're all familiar with the first 3 movies of the Star Wars, where Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker and all that, and they had the Death Star. Well, I think
That's right.
that George Lucas was getting some inside information from the secret space program, because this is what the ancient builder race was doing. They developed the capacity to hollow out moons and not to use them to destroy and conquer other planets, but to use them for peaceful purposes, to keep the peace throughout the local 52-star cluster. And this is what the progenitor race on Maldek was able to infiltrate and take over, and like I say, ending up destroying their planet. But the thing about these moons, and I mean this is getting pretty far out there, but trust me, for those who have not read my book, I do back it all up. I'm not just throwing this out there. I can back it up, but I'm just going to throw it out there right now. And that is that our moon was kind of like the prime example of a hollowed-out moon that can be used not only as a defensive shield, but also as a way of packaging up planets, literally entire planets, that were about to go from third dimension to fourth dimension, and to save those who were not ascension ready, to transport them to another third-dimensional planet. The moon and other hollowed-out moons became vehicles, if you will, that allowed that sort of transference to occur. Now, I know that sounds incredible, but this is well known throughout the secret space program. And did I say secrets? Oh, I guess I did.
Yes, you did.
So, yeah. There is a two-tiered technology system, and that is for sure. That's been around for a long time, and that would be fun to talk about too, George. I've got to go back to the Nazis in World War II to begin to dig that one out. But that's another tangent for perhaps a little bit later in the show. For right now, what I've been told from the various insiders. Now, David Wilcock, you've probably talked to him a number of times.
Yes, he's been on.
He's more than just a well-researched ufologist. He's also in on this ascension thing, and he's got people feeding him information that is pretty darn good. And what they all tell him, not all of them, but enough of his insiders have told him that our moon is hollow inside, absolutely. And I make the case, just really get into it.
Is it artificial?
Yeah, it's artificial, absolutely. And so inside the moon, it contains as many as 10,000 layers in some places, and it was perfectly capable of, and it did package up entire planets. I mean, the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, the people, the forests, you name it, and take them, because their planet would no longer be habitable for third-dimensional life, to another third-dimensional planet in some other solar system. And so evidently this was done on a regular basis. But to cut to what was going on Maldek here, those who did not make it to Earth, many of them, goodness sakes, billions of them, spent about 450,000 years inside our moon. And it was driven into our solar system to become the moon that we know out there today. And for a long, long time, according to the law of one, it was inhabited by these transplanted beings from Maldek.
Where's the opening? On the backside?
No, inside the moon. Inside the moon. You don't have to go to the backside when you've got a hollowed-out moon. Very livable space inside.
Where's the entrance, though?
I don't know. I haven't been there, but it's certainly there. I suppose the entrance would be on the dark side.
Now, is this based on research you've done, or have you been told these things?
No, I've been. It's a combination of having been told these things. It's a combination. In April of 2020, I signed up for David Wilcock's online course. It was about ascension, and I was so happy that I did, because the cornerstone there is not only about ascension, but he refers to the law of one on a repeated basis and uses that. That rekindled my interest in the law of one, and just came out with a lot of this inside information. But where did he get it from? Well, it's a combination of his insiders, and he has numerous insiders, and the law of one itself. So more than anything, I trust what the law of one says, and it gives the details on just exactly what happened on Maldek and exactly what happened on Mars. So to cut to the quick, the beings on Mars, they didn't, they were just, well, what are you going to do when you no longer have a planet? there are certain ET races, and this again is in the Law of One, whose job it seems to be is to come and literally rescue people who are not ascension ready when their planet's about to go fourth dimensional and transport them to another third dimensional planet. They alter their genetic structure so they're more suitable to the new world they're going to. They time travel them, and they do it in such a way that, for a short period of time, they might be disoriented, but very quickly, life goes on for those people. Well, the beings on Mars were taken to planet Earth, as were those who did not make it through the changes on Maldek. And so what we're talking about here is a bunch of beings who were more interested in creating war and conquering other planets than they were in creating peace. That's the same as saying that our planet, planet Earth, became inhabited by a bunch of backstabbing, low-life people that you probably wouldn't trust very much. And that's held us back a great deal. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the Law of One, what they say is that we go through 3 25,920-year cycles. That's also the length of the precession of the equinoxes. But 3 of these, let's just call them 25,000-year cycles. And they say that at the end of the first cycle, on a typical third-dimensional planet, that about 40% of the people ascend into the fourth dimension. And those who are not ascension ready are taken to another third-dimensional planet. This is through the as I indicated, the various ET races whose job it seems to be to do this. And by the way, Courtney Brown remote viewed this in the Cosmic Voyage book that he wrote way back in 1996. He also remote viewed Mars being destroyed and how they were cloned and time traveled and taken here to planet Earth. So we've got this confirmation coming from these two sources. And then to get back to the Law of One, at the end of the second 25,920-year cycle, they say the vast majority of those who did not make it the first time will now ascend into fourth dimension this time. And that the very few that might be left over, well, they will be taken care of or harvested, is the term the Law of One uses, at the end of the third cycle. But in our case, at the end of the first 25,000-year cycle, nobody ascended, relative speaking, 40% usually do. And at the end of the second cycle, second 25,000-year cycle, only 157 ascended, and they all stayed with the Earth and became ascended masters. And now the great question is, well, what's going to happen as we approach the end of the third cycle here? Because, you have a planet where up until now, virtually, well, with the exception of 157 people, nobody has made it into the higher worlds. And so the great question is, well, what's it going to take, and will we make it, and what happens to those who don't? And, we can just go on and on from there.
Are we in the midst of great change coming up?
Oh, yeah, we're in the midst of great changes that are happening right now. And to unpack this, I actually go back into the 1950s. If you look at the 1950s, there was an absolutely fascinating series of events that happened. Let me put it this way. There was a Canadian scientist by the name of, W.B. Smith. And W.B. Smith was actually he was asked by the Canadian government to go and investigate the UFO phenomenon. And he quickly realized that, you can see pieces of wreckage, which he did, and you can talk to people and all of that, but it might be better off to come in contact with people who claim to be actual contactees. Well, back in the 1950s, there was an annual UFO event in Joshua Tree, California, and typical attendance was about 5,000 people. So he became involved with multiple groups here who claimed that they were all contactees. And,
George Van Tassel and those people, right?
Well, yeah, and also a very popular author back in the name by the name of George Hunt Williamson. And he was a big name back then. His best-known book was called, it came out in 1959, and it was called Road in the Sky. Well, George Hunt Williamson was definitely a contactee, and he got teamed up with W.B. Smith, and they came across some fascinating information. So they listened to all these contactees, their stories, and they say, well, that's really interesting, but is it really real? So what they did was they devised a 100-part questionnaire. And if you were who you say you were, an actual contactee, you'd answer the questions in one way. And if you weren't, you'd be exposed. You couldn't fake this. And so from that, he was able to decide who was really real and who really wasn't. And the story that they were telling us is exactly what's going on right now, that we were told that our planet and the entire solar system was entering into the outer fringes of a great cosmic cloud, a great cosmic dust cloud, and that it was going to have dramatic impact on the quality of life here.
Dramatic or devastating or both?
Potentially both. But if it is devastating, not to worry, because if there are Earth changes, and the solar flash is kind of like the ultimate expression of that, first thing I'll say about that is that that's an outward reflection of our continuing state of internal imbalance. As above, so below. And so as long as we remain uncentered with unresolved trauma, emotional trauma from childhood and whatever, it continues to get projected outward. And so that's really what Earth changes are all about. But as we continue to raise our vibratory rate, and there is a great awakening that's happening here, and it's only just beginning relative to the possibility. Earth changes are not chiseled in stone. If we continue in the same rate, there will be Earth changes. But even if there is, not to worry, because then the group of benevolent ETs comes in, and they will take people who are not ascension ready and transport them to a planet, a third-dimensional planet, where they'll begin to and continue to live their lives and work through their karma until they, too, become ascension ready. And this is what Courtney Brown saw and reported on in his book, Cosmic Voyage. As a remote viewer, he saw sometime after the year 2000, he said it was, where this was what was happening on Earth, where a race of beings that we know as the Greys, evidently a certain aspect of the Greys, have this job of coming in and recloning the people. They are cloning experts, and just, reconfiguring them in such a way that they'll be more able to handle the new planet that they're going to, and also to time travel them at the appropriate moment in a way that they are not harmed one bit and that they're placed down on another third-dimensional planet. Now, initially, there might be some, where are we, what's going on? But very quickly, we're told that they just settle back into their normal lifestyle and life goes on. So that's what happens, and that's documented in the Law of One also. That's what happens to people who are not ascension ready, and for people who are ascension ready, for people who have done enough of the inner work to dramatically raise their vibratory rate, well, they're about to have the ride of a lifetime to go through an amazing series of events that, and again, not to worry, the pathway is all in our DNA on a very, very deep inner level. We've been there. We've done it before. We know exactly what to do, and we will know what to do. The real key is being in harmony with planet Earth when this happens, and if we are, planet Earth knows us and will take care of us, and as I say, give us the ride of a lifetime.
This, Bob, in your opinion, who was Adam and Eve?
Well, George, in my opinion, I don't think I'm really qualified to offer an opinion. I'm not a student of the Bible, so I don't generally go there.
Well, may they be space travelers?
I don't know. Just pure conjecture. But I'll tell you, George Hunt Williamson was enough of a student of the Bible to refer to some very, very fantastic biblical quotes that detail the ascension. And if we could, I'd just like to take a moment to dig into that a little bit, because it just unpacks a whole lot. This is all something that began in the 1950s when the ET contactees were telling us that we're going to be entering into a new area of space, and it's going to change everything and everyone. And so George Hunt Williamson, he goes on with these biblical quotes, and he talks about in the quotes how it's going to happen. I mean, the shift from third to fourth dimension, it'll happen in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. He talks about how flesh and blood cannot make it through, and that the new reality we're about to go into is so awesome that everything that, we thought we knew before, it just, relatively speaking, becomes so trivial that we just forget about it, and we're going to be reminded with who we really are. There's some interesting information in the Michael Newton afterlife books where he talks about in every incarnation we have at most maybe 15 to 20% of ourselves available to us, and the rest of us is out there somewhere, just sort of patiently waiting for us to catch up. But what the biblical quotes refer to is that we're going to be reunited with these severed aspects of ourselves. And so we're going to remember then being a soul who has had many incarnations where each identity was only a small portion of who we really are, and maybe not even the most important one. And we're going to be reunited with the facts of the aspects of ourselves that have been orchestrating the whole show from behind our scenes. So, by the way, the quotes appearing in the Bible, you can look at least 34, 35 other sources on the planet here, and you're going to find references to ascension. Various civilizations have put them into their religious myths. It appears in the Quran, the Old Testament, the Native American tradition. They certainly have it. I first became familiar with this back in 1979 when I heard about the Hopi prophecy. But the Celtics and the Druids have it in their tradition. The Hindus say very similar things. They call it the Samvarta fire at the end of an age. And, of course, there's references to it from the prophecies of Jesus and in the Old Testament. And, of course, George Hunt Williamson covered a number of these bases in his books. So this appears to be real stuff.
Now, your title in your book, Catching the Ascension Wave. Tell us about the title.
Well, okay, there is a personal transformation that we have to make if we're going to not only catch the wave, but also do it in a way that we're able to connect with Mother Earth so that Mother Earth creates critical mass. The planet, it's the 100th monkey theory. Critical mass must be created, and when it is, then bingo, pretty much everybody on the planet experiences a transformation. And that's the transformation that we're looking for. Basically, to keep it very, very simple, it's like I indicated when we first came on. It's really about discovering and ultimately mastering your innate ability to transmute life-detracting, the denser energies of fear and resentment and, well, you can just go on with guilt and shame and all that stuff that's vibrating at a very dense rate. To transmute that energy into higher energy, higher vibratory energy that's consistent with the unity of the universe. And that's the joyfulness and the inner peace and the creativity and the inspiration and the compassion that just goes along, that is just part of the game of raising your vibratory rate so that it's in harmony with all life everywhere.
This planet, Bob, seems to be at edge between good and bad, evil and non-evil, darkness and light. What do you think?
Well, definitely, without question, and I gave that plenty of space in my book. I talk about the dark night of the soul. Now, I'm not the only one who talks about the dark night of the soul, but I thought it was totally appropriate to call it that in the book. And so if we go back to the cosmic dust cloud, if you will, that's coming in, the secret space program is well aware of it. And they have flown their craft out there. And what they've discovered is that this energy had an effect on the crew, that the positive members became more positive, the negative ones became more so, because what's happening is that as it travels through the solar systems, the leading edge acts as a catalyst. And what it's doing is forcing people to wake up and deal with their karma and their dramas or be consumed by it. And so that means that the collective darkness is rising to the surface. It's very necessary in order to be transmuted into the light. As long as it's lurking behind the shadows and in the darkness, it's going to continue to do its number on us, both individually and collectively. So it has to come out of the darkness, and that's the increased energy of the cosmic superwave that's coming in, raising the vibratory rate of the planet and of everyone on it. It's stirring things up. Well, what that means is that we're in this period of transition, this collective dark night of the soul, and it's impacting everybody. And no question it's creating intense moments. I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people are feeling this intensity. But again, as I'm saying, it's absolutely necessary to create this displacement process where the lower vibratory rates of, anxiety, depression, fear, anger, resentment, on and on and on, all that is coming to the surface to be transmuted into the higher vibratory energy of that's consistent with the unity of life. The higher vibratory energy of unconditional love, the higher vibratory energy of inner peace, and of joyfulness and creativity and inspiration and all that good stuff. So we're right in the midst of this transformation. Now, catching the ride, or catching the wave, if you will, catching the ascension wave, as I suggested earlier, is really a function of all of us discovering that we have everything we need. It's all contained within us. And by going within, we can discover our innate ability to transmute this life-detracting energy into life-enhancing energy. And I don't leave people hanging. The entire second half of the book is devoted to the exact, and I do mean exact, details of how this personal transformation can be made. Because it's really the only game in town once you begin to, line up and tune with what's going on here.
All right, let's take some calls for you, and we'll take calls after the break as well. Let's go to Robert in Michigan to get us started. Hey, Robert, welcome.
Good morning. First of all, thank you, George, for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Frizell, I might have two questions for you, if I may. First one, I say with all due respect, and I do mean it very respectfully, if I may. History is replete with gurus that, they see a problem, they create a crisis, then only they have the solution, right? So I went on your website, I did some cursory research. It looks like you're providing metaphysical type ways to get in harmony, as you're talking about tonight, about how to catch the fourth wave, as it were, and people have to go through you to get it. So my first question is, how do we know you're just not another guru who's trying to create a problem and it's trying to sell something? And my second question is, how does God, or the idea of a deity or a higher being, come into play for you?
Okay, what's the second question again, Robert?
How does God come into your equations, Bob?
How does God come into the equation?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll just refer back to the law of one. To answer your first question, no, I'm not a New Age guru, and no, I'm not a New Age airhead who believes and trusts everything I say. I dig deeply into what I'm about, and I've been looking at this stuff very, very deeply ever since 1979. Made it my life's mission ever since 1990. If you look at the law of one, what they tell you is that there's only one spirit. Well, all the great spiritual teachings will tell you there's only one spirit moving through all life everywhere. You and I are a perfectly functioning hologram of the one infinite creator. And what that means then is that we know if you take a hologram, you say just cut it into 4 equal pieces and shine a laser through each of those pieces, you're going to get a smaller version of the whole. Well, that's exactly what we are. We are a smaller version of the whole. It is all contained within us. And to say you have to go through me in order to get it is ridiculous. You're misreading something on my website there, Robert. What I'm saying is that it's contained within each and every one of us. And that, to, again, quote from the law of one, what they say is that there's a basic choice that we need to make at a certain point. And that is, are we going to devote our lives to being of service to self, or are we going to devote our lives to service to the greater good? Now, they say if you're about service to yourself, the universe allows you to do that. However, there will be an enormous karmic debt that needs to be repaid. That's to be repaid. That's going to take you through many, many reincarnations and many, many lifetimes of having worked that through. If you choose to be of service to the greater good, service to self, then really what it's about is just taking responsibility for the fact that you are a perfectly functioning hologram of the whole. The infinite creator exists within you, within me, within every single being that has ever incarnated on this planet. And it's right now time for us to wake up and remember our true nature and let go of the false persona. And the truth is that because we are this perfectly functioning hologram of the one creator, we have it all within us. And like I've been suggesting, it's simply a matter of going inside and discovering your innate abilities. And fundamental to those abilities is the inherent ability to transmute energy, life-detracting energy into life-enhancing energy. Okay?
And the other one was God in your equation.
The other one was what?
About God in your equation.
Oh, of God in my equation. Well, I just answered it. We're all perfectly functioning holograms of the one infinite creator. God is within you and within everyone.
That's it?
That's it.
Let's go to Joe in Long Island, New York, east of the Rockies. Hey, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Bob. Two questions. First, on that back injury you had, sounded pretty annoying. I'm wondering how you got into the middle of that healing, which was self-directed, from what you were saying, vibrationally and energetically, and what would you advise of people that have like a nagging injury like that? And then the second thing is, you were talking about a hidden space program and the Nazis. Did the Nazis also hide stuff in terms of technology and what they were doing? Did they have like other areas of operation like South America, for example?
Like try Antarctica. Yeah, that takes us right into the secret space program and its origins. And so I first heard about it back in 1990 from a whistleblower by the name of Bill Cooper. But then later on...
Bill Cooper, right?
The Bill Cooper, William Milton Cooper, the guy who wrote the book...
Behold the Pale Horse.
There you go, yeah. And so, I just took what he said and just dug deeper and just to try and verify and confirm if there was truth to what he was saying. And I found out that indeed there was. Then I found out later that the Nazis, back in the mid-1930s some point, made contact with a race of malevolent beings, not very nice guys, known as the Draco Reptilians. And there was an exchange. Basically, I guess you would call it a treaty, where the Dracos just gave the Nazis brand new spaceships and the technology of how to build them and how to use them and everything. And what they wanted in return was help to go out and conquer other worlds. And of course, I guess the Nazis readily agreed to that. To bring it up to add some credibility to that, first of all, this comes from a number of whistleblowers, but I think the most credible source comes from a guy by the name of William Tompkins. And in 2015, at the age of 93, William Tompkins wrote a book. The guy's 93 years old, and he writes a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials.
Was he from Skunk Works? Was that the guy from Skunk Works?
From what?
Skunk Works?
I don't
company.
Know. I don't know what you mean there. But talking about William Tompkins and how he revealed that he was a contactee by a benevolent race of beings ever since childhood, this is, a race of beings known as the Nordics. And he maintained contact with them throughout his lifetime, and the U.S. Navy considered him to be a rather important resource. And so he was just a really young guy during World War II. He couldn't have been any more than 18 or 20, yet he was put in charge of 22 or 23 American spies who had successfully infiltrated the German space program, including the base that they established underneath the ice in Antarctica. And what they brought back was some rather startling information that confirmed that, yep, they were out there, they were doing it, and they'd been to the moon, they'd been to Mars, they'd been around the block, so to speak. and it just goes on from there. In 1952, the Nazis buzzed the Capitol. Originally, everybody thought that they were ETs flying their UFOs around the Capitol, but it wasn't. It was the Germans. And what they were doing was signaling us, saying, hey, we want to sign a treaty with you guys. It took us 3 years to go along with it, but in 1955, we, the Americans, signed a treaty with the Nazis, and what this did was it allowed the Nazis to infiltrate our government in very significant ways. We all know about the Project Paperclip, where the German scientists were brought into our country. Well, they united with them and really took over our government in a number of ways. And so this was kind of the essence of President Eisenhower in his farewell message in January of 1961 when he said, hey, beware of the military-industrial complex. I think this is what he was talking about.
Of course, those German scientists built our space program, Bob, didn't they?
Well, it became our secret space program as a result of the treaty that got signed in 1955. But yeah, the Germans are very, very heavily involved in this, and to the day they remain so. I didn't really believe any of this at the time because, goodness sakes, they lost the war, right?
Yep.
Well, I later found out that, they did lose the ground war in Europe, but in fact, they won the space war. And so they've taken over in some very significant ways, and that continues to this very day.
And the Soviets got some of them too, didn't they?
The Soviets, they got their fair share of scientists too, but I don't know if they were let in on any of the details of the secret space program. If they were, I don't know anything about it.
Are you concerned at all about the future, Bob, or are you upbeat?
Oh, I'm totally upbeat. I'm not at all concerned about the future because here again, I see that this enormous increase of vibratory energy is coming in, and it's impacting everyone and everything on the planet. Really, George, the only game in town, as I see it, is just learning how to ride with and to catch this wave. So you can raise your vibratory rate and be in line with the higher dimensional qualities, the higher vibratory qualities of inner peace and joyfulness. And I say these are exciting times to be alive, absolutely.
All right, let's go to the phones again. Let's go to Brendan in Austin, Texas to get us started. Hey, Brendan.
Hello, thank you, Bob and George.
Sure thing.
Some of the callers have asked for a brick show, and we got to go straight to the guy from the IMF, John Perkins. That's who should be the guest for that show.
He's one of the best.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. We got to have him back on. And thank you so much, Bob. It's been incredibly interesting listening tonight. I have one question, and then I was curious of something afterwards if we have time. But have you remote viewed any underground bases, societies, or tunnels, or undersea? What's going on underneath the ground?
Well, okay, I'm not the remote viewer. The remote viewer I refer to in my book is a guy who wrote a book back in 1996 called Cosmic Voyage, and his name was Courtney Brown. And what Courtney Brown saw in his remote viewing was some rather interesting phenomenon. He witnessed the human beings who he said in his words, looked very much like Americans, because they were. Sometime after the year 2000, who were transported by a race of beings that we know as the Greys, who are cloning experts who clone these people into new bodies and time-traveled them into a third-dimensional planet in the Pleiades. And then I refer to also the remote viewing phenomenon that Courtney Brown saw on Mars, where he saw Mars being destroyed, having their planet, their atmosphere being blown away, and he also saw how they were being transported to another third-dimensional planet. Guess what? Planet Earth. And so that's the remote viewing that I know. No, I'm not a remote viewer. But what's going on underneath the oceans? Well, there's the mid-Atlantic Ridge, and there's volcanoes, and there's other bigger volcanoes. And if indeed the solar flash happens, not to worry though if it does, in the process of burying the Earth from between 40 to 400 feet of rock, you wouldn't want to be here when that's going on. And don't worry, you won't be. You'll be transported to another third-dimensional planet, or you'll raise your vibratory rate enough to be ascension ready. And either way, you're going to be just fine. But if the solar flash happens, you can be certain that all the underground volcanic ridges, they're going to go off, and that includes the Yellowstone caldera. And like I say, you wouldn't want to be around for that. That's really about all I can tell you about remote viewing. Haven't been there, haven't done that, but I'm absolutely fascinated by it, even though originally I didn't believe it, I didn't trust it, because I didn't trust Dr. Doom, Major Ed Dames, when he was talking about this way back in the day when Art Bell was the host. But I dug deeper, and I found out that, hey, maybe there is something to this remote viewing, and so I picked up Cosmic Voyage again and took a new look at it, and I'm really, really glad I did.
What was your second thought, Brendan?
Yeah, super quick. Thank you for the clarification. I'm sorry for my mistake. So at the person that was the remote viewing, did they ever talk about Dr. Doom? Ed Dames had once said that when he was remote viewing, he hit a wall and he wasn't ever able to go past that period for a time. That was the solar storm. Did they ever talk about getting stuck at that period?
No, but in my book, I talk about a guy by the name of Bill Wood, who was referring to a phenomenon known as Project Looking Glass. And what Project Looking Glass is a combination of advanced technology coming out of the secret space program, ET technology, and it's a way of bending time enough to get a probable outcome of the future. But the problem that the global elite, the cabal, was running into was that after a certain date, December 21st, 2012, their ability to manipulate events from behind the scene, which is something they've been doing on a regular basis for a long, long time, been controlling us covertly from behind the scenes. But after December 21st, 2012, everything converged into a single timeline where they were no longer able to do it. And so they brought Bill Wood, a former Navy SEAL and a very psychic and a very out-there guy, onto the job to see if he could research it and see if he could come up with a solution. And so he did his job, he did his due diligence, and he came to the same conclusion that, nope, I'm sorry, there's nothing that can be done about this. In other words, what that meant is that after December 21st, 2012, no matter how much they tried to manipulate and control us, it would have the opposite effect. It would boomerang and come right back at them and create exactly the opposite effect. And what it means is that their time is just about up. So that's what I can say about that. Hope that helps.
Well, let's go to Tim now in Carson City, Nevada. Welcome to the program. Hey, Timmy, go ahead.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Tim.
Bob, this is very interesting, especially with the leaks of the aliens coming out lately. I have a couple of questions. I'm kind of a shirt sleeve guy, so excuse me if you had already explained it and I missed it.
Sure.
This higher ascension that we're leading up to, this 25,000-year event, is that going to be an actual event? I mean, like physically, where people are going to be piling onto the moon to move to another planet? And also, if that's true, how does that affect people in the past who have been contactees or abductees, and how does that affect humans currently? Me, I'm on my own spiritual enlightenment journey. I meditate and things like that. Won't that affect?
Well, it's impacting everybody on the planet, to be sure about that. And so, first question is, well, is it real? And will we all be jumping onto the moon and try and take the ride that way? The answer is yes, it is real. And I referred earlier to the fact that it's in 35 different cultures, and call it what you will in their religious myths or whatever. So we have the prophecies of Jesus. We also have the Native American prophecies. They talk about it in great detail. The Hopi prophecy goes into it in great detail. And they're all talking about the same thing. But it doesn't stop there. The Celtics, the Druids have it. It's in the Quran. Goodness, the Hindus have it. It's the Samvarta fire, the end of an age. And again, the Old Testament has it, and they're all talking about the same thing. But the law of one goes into it in great detail. Now, how would they know? Well, they've been there and done that. They went through their ascension 2.6 billion years ago. And to cut to the quick, it's common knowledge throughout the higher life forms that this is something that happens on a regular basis. Every third-dimensional planet is going to go through 3 of these 25,920-year cycles, and like I suggested earlier, typically about 40% of the population makes it after the first cycle. Most of the remaining population makes it at the end of the second cycle, and the very few who were left over will definitely make it through at the end of the third cycle. But on our planet, something different indeed happened because nobody made it through the first cycle. Only 157 made it through at the end of the second cycle. They became ascended masters. And here we are now at the end of the third cycle. And so the question is, will we be able to reach critical mass that will enable the vast majority of people to go through into the fourth dimension? Now, the law of one says that even though it's not probable, because we're retarded in some very substantial ways, because we've taken on all these people, what I like to call backstabbing misfits from Maldek and from Mars and also from other planets who were set out to conquer other worlds and in the process of doing it destroyed their own planets. So that's held us back significantly. We've also been held back significantly by the global elite, the Illuminati, the cabal that have been hoarding all of the knowledge. But all of that is coming to a head right now due to these quick and accelerated times. And it's becoming very possible for us to be on that, and I do believe we are on the optimal timeline where we are creating the critical mass, the 100th monkey phenomenon, where, to refer to that for a moment, they don't know the exact number, but in the 1950s, there were all these monkeys on the islands that were eating their sweet potatoes, and they discovered that by washing them first, they tasted a whole lot better. And so it continued to grow until, let's just say, 99 monkeys were washing their sweet potatoes, and then all of a sudden, bingo, the 100th monkey, so to speak, started washing, and bingo, they all got it. Virtually all the monkeys on all the islands started washing their sweet potatoes. That's the creation of the critical mass. And I make the case, I give detailed information as to why I do feel that we are on that optimal timeline, and we're creating a condition that we won't have to go, most likely, if we stay on this timeline, we're not going to have to go through the earth changes, through the solar flash and through the shifting of the poles and all of that. Because if we can align with life, now, so that we can keep it within the realm of possibility, the law of one makes this choice, says we all have the choice that we need to make the shift from service to self to service to others, service to the greater good. And they go on to say that if you actually come to the point to where you want to help people at least 51% of the time, well, you can still be up to 49% of the time manipulative, controlling, and evil, running your number, if you will, and you're still going to make it through. They say you just have to be more interested in helping people and in working towards the greater good than in causing them pain and keeping them in fear and going for what's in it for yourself. In other words, it's what it's about is shifting from a you or me world to a you and me world. And in a you or a me world, nobody's empowered. All you're left with is gesturing and just nonsense. But in a you and me world, instead of giving someone a fish dinner, you teach them how to fish so that they have a skill that they can use for an entire lifetime to further and foster their own growth. And that's really, I believe, the timeline that we're on. So I'm extremely optimistic. I think that this is a very exciting time to be alive, and I'm just, if this stuff didn't resonate with me on a very, very deep inner level, I would certainly not be researching it, and I would never be writing about it. So writing this book for me was just a joy. Actually, the book wrote itself. I was just going along for the ride.
Let's grab a quick call from Laura in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Hey, Laura, let's squeeze you in. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
If Cape Canaveral was stopped from going into outer space, would that save life on planet Earth? Because outer space is destroying planet Earth's atmosphere.
Well, okay, that's an interesting question.
About a minute left.
And 1
Bobby.
minute left. What I'll say about that is that to me that points to the Apollo space program, and my question is, did we really go to the moon? The answer is absolutely, but through the secret space program, and I'm not sure about the Apollo program because there's a 25,000-mile radiation belt called the Van Allen belt that you have to get through in order to make it through with the tin can technology that NASA was giving us back in the day. We got 20 seconds left. Well, what I'll say is that it's the most exciting game in town. It's an exciting time to be alive, and it's just a matter of stepping up to the plate and raising your vibratory rate enough so that you can catch the wave.
All right, catch the wave indeed, and his website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.